Good evening. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experiences, in fact. So I'm a scientist, but also I tend to uh, 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 be in the wrong place at the wrong time, as you can see, in many places. So um, this is not a tsunami, it's just an artist impression. So tsunami, we say, is a harbor wave in Japanese. They're waves resulting from subsea earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and landslides. And we also have some another classification called meteor tsunamis from meteorological effects. So basically, earthquake happens in the bottom of in the Earth's crust that moves the seabed, that moves the sea surface, that creates a tsunami. And they basically propagate away from the system. So when we look at the Indian Ocean, we have these black lines where the mid-oceanic ridges in the center, that's where new crust is made, and they basically sink on the edges of the Indian Ocean. And as they move away and subduct, friction is created, and you have earthquakes being propagated. So these are the earthquakes, and you see they're along exactly the same lines. And one of the main things for a tsunami is that you need to have vertical movement of the seabed, and that happens only in Sumatra and also off the Makran of the Pakistan coast. So you can see when you actually look at where earthquakes have happened, you actually happen very much off Sumatra. There has been one off Bangladesh and one off on the border of Iran and Pakistan. So I'm going to talk about the 2004 tsunami, and that basically had an area of 1,300 by 200 kilometers vertically moved by 20 meters. That's a huge amount of energy that created the earthquakes. So what do you think about a tsunami? You've now been told that if you go to the beach and the water recedes, a tsunami is coming. That's not always correct because it depends on the location that you're in. It's only on the landward side of the fault because a tsunami waves basically have what we call a depression wave, which goes towards the land, an elevation wave, which goes towards the ocean. So if you're in Sri Lanka, any of the waves that you actually go through, so Sri Lanka, Maldives, Australia, etc., you will have the water level increase before it decreases. And then in Sumatra, Thailand, etc., the water level will decrease before it goes up. So this one actually shows a tsunami coming through. Blue is negative, and then red is positive, and you can see the difference between them. Tsunamis have been going for centuries and many, but in from the 1900s, there seems to be periods. There was enhanced tsunami earthquakes, so in the 1960s, and the early 2000s. So in 2004 to 2007, there were 4 different earthquakes and tsunamis in the Indian Ocean, which impacted around the whole of the ocean. So I'm going to talk about the tsunami on the 26th of December, Boxing Day for most of you. It's a holiday time for me. I was actually in Sri Lanka at that time, and I was basically on that day following this road really on the coastline down to a place called Bentora. And by the time I got to Charitha, I basically got people running along onto the road. So the orientation is such like this. So we actually have the beach, we have the railway line, and we have the road. So now I'm driving along this road. And then when it was this place here, Charitha, this is actually on my way back, I noticed this. But as I was crossing this bridge, I see a lot of water and big waves, and I didn't really click it very much that what might be happening. And then I got to this place. So here we actually have a railway line, so you can actually see the road. I got to this place and I couldn't go any further because one of those boats, the catamarans, were right across the road and I couldn't go further. So that's where I was standing. Except when I was standing, this whole system was intact. So you can see this is a railway station. It just happens that my great-grandfather built it because this is my mother's village, and the waves went over 7 meters high above this railway station. But when I got there first, there was no waves. It was all intact. And this is another view from there. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you some images to say what actually happened. So now imagine that I'm on this road. The first wave came, so here, and it only came a little bit. But it managed to actually bring that boat to the road, stop me going further, luckily. And then the water level recedes. So now here, the water level goes back, and then the water level comes back again. That is the railway line. That is the road. That is the railway crossing. And I was actually standing there about 5 to 10 minutes before that satellite image was taken. So I managed to escape fortuitously, but I also did the wrong thing because as a tsunami scientist, I knew exactly what these waves were. So I got there, I got out of the car and I asked how many waves had come. They said 3 or 4. I said, fine. No waves are coming, tsunami is come and gone. How wrong I was. So as I said, as I go back, I could see all of these features. And as an oceanographer, you know what they're, and you say, oh yeah, it's interesting. Then the water level goes back down again. You can see the excursion. And then you see the water level coming in. You have the flooded areas. And then the extent of the flooding into the land. And then I was with my son, and I was very sorry for him because I thought I'm taking him to onto the beach, but we couldn't go to the beach. And as far as I was concerned, there were no more waves coming because the tsunami has come and gone. So I went to this beach here, Tangerine Beach Hotel, and I actually stayed there. And then I parked the car, and my son said, Dad, turn the car facing the land as opposed to the ocean. Good thinking. And I got down and I told all the people, don't worry, no more waves are coming, no more waves are coming. And then this man said, Sir, look at this wave coming. And I could see this huge wave coming towards me. So I started running. My son was much more bright than me. He got into the car and he actually drove off, leaving me behind. And I managed to chase and get into the car and went away. So that's where these waves were coming. These pictures were taken. So now I was wondering what was going on. And before the tsunami happened in Sri Lanka, I kept telling everybody that Sri Lanka is one of the most luckiest places in the world because Sri Lanka has no sea level rise. There's no climate change. There's no sea level rise in Sri Lanka. So everybody said, well, what is happening? Why is it? I said, well, Sri Lanka doesn't have a tide gauge. You're not measuring sea level. So how can you say how the sea level is rising or not? So ultimately, when I came back to Australia, I contacted some of my US friends and asked them whether they could actually sponsor and put a tide gauge. So this is the tide gauge that I initiated, and that was established 3 months before the tsunami. It's one of the few tide gauges we have data from. So now we have this data. I can go and actually look at what the tsunami looked like. So here we actually have the tide. This is for the month of December 2004. You have the tsunami. Now I'm going to keep zooming in. So now we got to zoom in. Now you have the actual tsunami. And now each one of those little asterisks is 2 minutes. So when the water level increased 2.5 meters, it took 10 minutes. So it's not a big wave comes through. It comes slowly and rising. Now the problem was that there was this missing data here. And what happened was that in this tide gauge, see, it's a hole, and there is a floating a float, which basically defines the water level. Because the water level dropped below the bottom, that float was stuck at the bottom. So we didn't get any data till my colleague actually went then putting it back. So we got data, but we didn't know what happened here. And luckily, we had some data from offshore that I managed to reconstruct the waves. So now this is the offshore, and that missing but's in there. I realized that the highest waves came 3.5 hours after the first one. Now, where did that come from? This is where I was totally wrong, because I thought 1 or 2 waves right at the beginning, half an hour, that's it. Why is the third, this big waves comes along? It happened to be a reflected wave, because the waves traveled across past Sri Lanka and then hit the Maldives chain, got reflected, and come back. So now I can go and convert my experience into my expertise in predicting tsunamis and to understand what's actually going on. So now you can actually see the waves come here. You can see the waves hit Maldives, and now you actually see the reflected wave is coming back. And that is the one that causes the 3.5 hour delay of the biggest waves coming back into Colombo. So that's sort of the thing. So this is the road that I was driving maybe 10 minutes before. You can see the ocean outside. You can see the main road that I was talking about. Same part in here. Some of you may have understood this train disaster, where the only thing which was high point was the train. So when the first wave came along, everybody, even the local villagers, climbed onto the train as a safety issue. But when the reflected waves came, they were all got washed away. We think only about 2,000. Nobody knows exactly how many did actually happen. So this is another component, another place called Panadura, when I started going, and you can see the water going over this light pole. And for scale, I have my son, and then you also have these components on the system. So you go out, these boats obviously shouldn't be on the beach, they should be in the harbor, and you can actually see all the way around the boats which were in the harbor has been taken away from the system. So of course, this was very disastrous. Nobody in living memory has actually had a experience of a tsunami. Nobody actually even knew the name tsunami. So, but then they started bringing out this a historical part, which actually happened in 100 BC, 2,000 years ago. So King Kalanitis was the king of the present Western province that includes Colombo. And he suspected that his brother Uttia had an interest in his wife and banished him to the hill country. But Uttia was sending the love letters to a queen via a Buddhist priest, and the king found out. But however, the king believed that the priest was writing the love letters instantly, convicted him to death by boiling him in a cauldron of oil. So here is a mural in one of the temples showing the priest being put to death. Now, when that happened, in response to the death, the priests, there was a large flood event. The public believed that the flood was because the sea gods were infuriated with the death of the priest, and the king was asked to make a sacrifice, and he put his own daughter Devi and sent her off into the ocean, and the sea subsided. And the ship with Devi came ashore along the southern province, and she married the ruler there and was called Vihar Mahadevi, and her son basically was a very famous king who united the whole of Sri Lanka. So this system here, mural, actually showing the flooding event at that time. So I don't actually believe this was a tsunami. I'm not disputing that it was a flood event, but it couldn't be a tsunami, because in our case, in 2004, a tsunami lasted 3.5 hours. And in the 20th century, nobody ever managed to get a boat out in that 3 hours when the tsunami was there. So 2,000 years ago, there was no way a tsunami came and they were managed to actually put a ship out into to sacrifice in that way. So there was a flood event, but it was not a tsunami. So here is a pictorial showing the daughter of the king being put onto the ship and sent away. And as things happen, so this is where the Davy was put into the ocean, and the ship ended up in Charitha. And this is the water level record during the 2004 tsunami. And after that, we established another water level record in Charitha. And on the right, you see the tsunami in 2005 recorded in the same place that she came ashore. So one of the things that we did afterwards was that where the train accident was, we managed to raise funds in Australia to build tsunami houses for people who lost their houses and belongings, and off we went into the system. So from science to history to human endowment. Thank you.